The night everything changed began with a contract and a warning, and if anyone had told her that a single decision would rewrite the rest of her life, she would have laughed and walked away. Yet as Elena Carter stood alone on the balcony of her family's glass-walled penthouse overlooking Manhattan, the city glowing beneath her like a restless sea of light, she felt an unease she could not name, a sense that something invisible was already moving toward her. Elena had grown up surrounded by wealth, power, and constant attention, but none of it had ever felt safe. Not after the threats started arriving in envelopes with no return address, not after the black SUV followed her twice in the same week, and certainly not after the incident outside the charity gala where a stranger had gotten far too close before disappearing into the crowd. Her father, a billionaire investor with more enemies than friends, had made the decision without asking her, and that was how, on an otherwise ordinary evening, a man named Adrian Cole stepped into her life under the simple title of personal security. Adrian arrived quietly, dressed in a tailored black suit that concealed both strength and discipline, his posture calm, his eyes sharp without being intrusive, the kind of man who did not waste movement or words. Elena noticed him immediately, though she tried not to, tried to pretend he was just another employee assigned to her protection, but there was something about the way he observed the room, calculating exits and distances with effortless precision, that made her feel both watched and strangely reassured. Their first conversation was brief and professional, his voice low and controlled as he explained the boundaries of his role, the rules he followed, and the expectations he had for her cooperation. And when he finished, he met her gaze with an intensity that made her straighten unconsciously. He was not handsome in a polished way like the men she had dated before, but there was a quiet magnetism about him, a restrained power that came from knowing exactly who he was. Elena told herself it meant nothing. She had learned long ago that attachment was a liability, that people came into her world for reasons that rarely had anything to do with her heart, and she was determined not to repeat old mistakes. Adrian, for his part, told himself the same thing as he began his assignment, reminding himself that Elena Carter was a client, not a woman to be noticed, admired, or desired. He had spent years building walls around his emotions, years in dangerous environments where feelings could get you killed, and he knew better than to let curiosity turn into something more. Yet from the moment he watched her move through her apartment, barefoot and defiant despite the fear she tried to hide, he sensed that this job would test him in ways he had not anticipated. The first days passed in a careful routine, Adrian shadowing her movements with practiced discretion, driving her to meetings, standing a few steps behind her at events, and keeping his presence constant but unobtrusive. Elena found herself growing aware of him in unexpected ways, the sound of his footsteps behind her, the way his jacket shifted when he moved, the subtle tension in his shoulders whenever someone approached too quickly. She resented the loss of privacy, but could not deny the strange comfort his presence brought, a feeling she had not experienced in years. One evening, as rain streaked down the windows and the city lights blurred into reflections, the tension between them finally surfaced in words when Elena accused him of watching her too closely, and Adrian replied with quiet firmness that his job was to keep her alive, not comfortable. The honesty in his tone caught her off guard, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, the air thick with something unspoken. Adrian broke the moment first, stepping back and re-establishing the professional distance he knew he needed to maintain, but the shift had already happened, subtle and irreversible. The real turning point came the night Elena insisted on attending a small private fundraiser against her father's advice, determined to prove she could still control her own life. Adrian objected on security grounds, listing risks with calm precision, but Elena's frustration spilled over, and she demanded he trust her judgment. Reluctantly, he agreed, increasing precautions while staying close, his senses on high alert as they entered the elegant townhouse filled with polished smiles and hidden agendas. For most of the evening, nothing happened, and Elena began to relax, even enjoying the normalcy of conversation and music, until she noticed Adrian's attention snap sharply toward the back corridor, his body subtly positioning itself between her and a man she had not seen before. The shift was instantaneous and chilling, and before Elena could ask what was wrong, the power went out. Darkness swallowed the room, followed by a surge of panic, and in that chaos, a hand grabbed Elena's arm, pulling her toward the corridor. She did not scream, not at first, shock freezing her voice, but then Adrian was there, his grip firm and unyielding, as he wrenched her free and shielded her with his body. The seconds that followed blurred together, the sounds of struggle, hurried footsteps, and shouted orders, until security lights flickered on and the threat vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. When it was over, Elena found herself pressed against Adrian's chest, his arm locked around her, his heartbeat rapid beneath her palm, and in that moment the world narrowed to the space between them. Adrian realized he was holding her too tightly, that his professional mask had cracked, but he could not make himself let go right away, not when she was trembling and breathing him in as if he were an anchor. Eventually, he stepped back, apologizing stiffly, but Elena could not look away from him, her mind replaying the instant when she had felt truly, undeniably safe. The drive home was silent, charged with unspoken emotion, and once they reached the penthouse, Elena surprised both of them by thanking him, not as a client, but as a woman who understood how close she had come to losing everything. Adrian accepted her gratitude with restraint, reminding her that danger was still present and that their vigilance needed to increase. Yet as he left her standing in the softly lit living room, he knew something fundamental had shifted. That night, Elena lay awake replaying the feel of his arms around her, the calm authority of his voice in the darkness, and the way her heart had responded without her permission. Adrian, alone in his apartment, stared out at the city and acknowledged the truth he had been avoiding since the moment he met her, that this assignment was no longer just a job, and that one night had changed everything in ways neither of them could yet understand.